The thing is, what can we, journalists, do? I was telling you the example of Romano Prodi at the very beginning. We can reinforce cohesion, social cohesion. We can reinforce independence if we just say to the politicians, look, I'm not going to tell you this. I'm going to ask the questions that I think society would ask you if they were me. If they were sitting there, they would ask you that. And I should do what I think is of social interest, not of what will make you happy. And journalists can help to transform this reality, I think. This is the question we should answer to ourselves. I think that doesn't mean that we are not explaining what's happening. I mean, Papa Francesco is social interest. We need to explain what's happening in Rome. We need to explain that Obama is giving explanations about what happened in Newtown, so this is important, or the Arab Spring, which is these images of the CNN. This is of social interest, as is of social interest the coverage of this Catalan demonstration. In 2010, I'm sure you've heard about the demonstration in 2012, which is the one that was portrayed all over Occidental world, I think in the States particularly, but also in Europe. But this demonstration was even more important, right? Because this demonstration was for the constitutional sentence against the Catalan law. That was the very beginning of the Catalan process. And to explain this demonstration had made that the demonstration of 2012 was even more strong in collective sense. So I think this is the job of the journalist to explain what's going on. It was an independent demonstration, very important in Catalonia. And the media attitude that we should preserve, we should do to preserve this social interest is think of the minorities. We never think of minorities when we broadcast. We should think of the minorities. We should think the interest of the ones who are unheard, the ones who have no chance to explain what they are doing. We should explain different points of view, which is not. We should question power structures, and we should look at new approaches to public affairs. This is the attitude that journalists should have, even in public or in private media, to prove this commitment with social interest. Why is under siege? Because we cannot defend on our own, because we don't have the tools, because the interests of politics and media groups threaten this professional performance, and because of social nets are questioning now journalist judgment, right? Social nets are saying, you know, we don't believe you, journalists, because you are serving political interests, because you are serving the owners of your media groups. We don't believe on you anymore. So they circulate information, sometimes without the proper capacity to know if that what they are saying is true or not. Professional accountability of journalism, I think, is needed to preserve this social interest. Engagements of advertisers. What does it mean? That the industry in which we are in a capitalist system, and social values meet at the media arena. The advertisers add the value of their products to media content. So when you see an ad, now yesterday I was watching TV here in the States, and I was changing 35 channels, and I couldn't find content. I mean, it was adverts all the time. It was difficult to find program. Normally it was films, many films, some news, some point, but ads everywhere. The ads are crucial because they add value to media content. If we convince industry that if they put adverts on this channel, they are doing this content to be surviving within the programming, then they will make them act responsible for the content they are supporting, right? So we should convince industry that they can improve social responsibility. What do they do to feel like this? Well, they just look at the audience figures, right? The quantitative figures that they get every day, they tell social impact. And they say, you know, I want to get to 10 million people, so I put an ad in this program, even if it's rubbish, right? But they don't look for influence, social influence, which is qualitative analysis. If we manage, which we haven't, to incorporate qualitative analysis to everyday programming of each channel, industry would make a contribution for social responsibility. Because when you tell them, and we've done that in Europe, several countries in Europe have this qualitative analysis through GFK, quality measurements every day. When you tell the companies, look, if you put adverts in this program, people think that your company is contributing to this content, and this is not good for your marketing, right? When you tell them that, they react. So they can contribute to change things. But what do they do to survive with this? Social responsibility corporate. They give some money to some cause and they feel fine, you know? They just put adverts in all these contents that are not good for social responsibility, and then once a year they put some money for one social cause, say, you know, to end up with violence, domestic violence or whatever, and they feel happy with it. But this is not the solution. And the other thing is, what do we do? This is an ancient image, right? This woman is doing a cake, this ancient telephone here. But now we can act, because this is not the situation. We are an audience that can change things. If you look at certain programs, you empower them. If you change and look at different programs, and you look at the programs that you are interested in, you give some power to these programs to survive. You have to make that the programs that you watch are worth watching. Otherwise, you will end up giving power to the programs that we don't want to watch on television. And finally, social values. I said at the beginning that social values are nuclear. You are here in one of the best universities of the world. Here you are formed to be, some of you are in the career for success. We are told every day that we have to be competitive, that we have to be successful, and education forms us in social values that relate exclusively to success and competitiveness, ones against the other, right? So why do we complain about media? Media do the same. Media decide that the only things that will get somewhere is to be successful, to be rich, or to be competitive. But I think we should make competitive that media would be compatible with solidarity or cooperation, and these values should get back to media groups as projects. Conclusions. Regulatory framework, insufficient. Media groups, commercial interests, governments and business, and media lobby fight against content regulation. Professionals devoted to success with little awareness of social responsibility. Advertisers in the industry missing commitment, deciding their investments, and audience figures, which is the main thing. Audience diminished social responsibility, not aware of its own power, and social values which are now reinforced competitiveness and economic success. So we are lost in this labyrinth because who makes the burger that we are eating every day through media are media groups, politics and market, and journalists and media professionals trapped between the interests of all these stakeholders. And who does eat this burger? We eat it up when we watch television, right? So audience should decide if you want to balance the interests of these stakeholders. The audience can give journalism the adequate balance between all these interests, and to all this, I only want to add one factor, which is technology. Technology is not helping to us. Why? Because we are in a hurry all the time, right? No time to think, no time to evaluate. You are here listening to me, eating, trying, 1 hour, we have to be rushing to the next step, right? And that happens as well in the media, information. We need to broadcast everything live at one click. Everybody wants to know everything. Who thinks of what is truthful? Who investigates the information before it's published? Who has the time to evaluate properly what we are going to broadcast next? It's not happening. Everything must be available at once and at one click. And Twitter is now a challenge. Great tool, dangerous tool. Great tool, dangerous tool. Because everybody decides that what we are doing here is going to be portrayed around the world. Even if it's not interesting, even if some of us, we are not conscious of it. Sometimes I'm lecturing at the university and they are tweeting what I'm saying about mass communication. I mean, who is interested in that without the context? Without the context, some things have no sense. But Twitter is being used for journalists to portray themselves, not the information, to portray themselves as marks. They become personally a mark that has 100,000 followers, and they walk by the streets. I have 100,000 followers. I have 100,000 followers. And they decide that they are going to explain where they are eating, what they have read, and what time they are going to sleep, which is of no interest whatsoever for anybody, but they are stars, followed by thousands of people. And they compete against each other. See who is the one who has more followers, right? And this is a problem. So, unemployed journalists, which are the main problem now, the basic problem now in Spain, social nets and social interaction, which is a substitute of information. This is a problem that in 10 years' time we will be analyzing this in academic terms, because this is something that we are going to pay badly for that. And crisis of social confidence and journalism. Society do not want to pay for journalism. That's why. Because information circulates through the social net. Who is going to pay for a paywall in the New York Times? New York Times, the editor of the New York Times, who is associated to ARA with our newspaper, was telling me the other day that they have the same doubts about what are they going to do, because people don't want to pay. They want to pay. They don't want to pay for information because they get the information for free. Because the same journalists that are writing and being paid by New York Times or whatever, they put their articles in their own blogs or they tweet them. So how they are going to be this platform surviving if people is not conscious of the social responsibility of the media and they don't give value to journalism as an occupation, right? So we are in an emergency. We need to find a way out of this labyrinth. Otherwise, we will lose the social guidance of what's relevant to what's going on in this world. We are trained to think about what's happening. This is important. We are going to explain that. We will be vulnerable otherwise to any, which is not always innocent, anonymous information that goes through the social nets. Sometimes it's information that is interested by one of the stakeholders. So I think we are in a very threatening situation for democracy if we don't deal properly with media problems. And unfortunately, the image that we have is that media is just entertainment. There is a business to make profit. Want some companies more than others, but public broadcasting service is nuclear to strengthen this democracy this democracy, and I think if we don't take seriously this, we will be in trouble, because we need to make sure that all our society is conscious of what we have, what's the problem, the public affairs problems that we have altogether, and I think if we don't have proper media, we will lose the chance to participate in our future. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Professor Terribas is open for questions.
Yes, I like answering questions much more.
I have a question. I'm wondering how the economic crisis in Spain has affected this relationship between journalists and the government.
Very much so, because what happened in the last 4 years is that the different media groups, commercial groups, have fusioned. So we now have two big commercial groups. One is Mediaset, which is Italian-based, as you know, which is the one who is controlling the main market. And the other one is the editorial company called Planeta, who has Antena 3 and has La Sexta, which is two other channels. So, in fact, the PBS has gone down in Spain because they had the advertising incomes taken off by law, this law of 2010, and the two main groups in Spain have controlled everything, all the audiovisual rights and audiovisual rights here in the United States in terms of the big companies here as well. And in Catalonia, the PBS is also having trouble to get public financing, and the adverts are going down everywhere, so this is not the income, that the double income public and adverts is not helping. So really what's happening in Spain is the same in Italy, it's the same in France, is oligopolistic situation, if that's the right word.
Political?
Oligopoly. That was it. And public service broadcasting diminishing.
In that context, one of your little phrases in one of your points reminded me of something I understood about the funding in England. One of your points said, except in England. Because they're different. And my understanding is that they're funded by a tax on hardware that projects content. And now, as far as I know, it's only been television sets. I don't know if they're adding PCs, laptops, and smartphones to that or not. But are they as vulnerable financially in funding shortfalls as France, Italy, and Spain, as you've mentioned? And if not, is there any initiative to try to pick up on that model instead?
Well, that model was great when it was founded, because the tax fee in Britain was assumed by British society as a distinguished service that they had. And when the commercial broadcasters started to work in Britain in 1955, I think, everybody had assumed that you would pay your tax fee to have the BBC. So British society is happy with that. Now we will see if they get adapted to new technologies, because this is so difficult to use the British system in all the different tools that you have, because you fix the tax because you are owning a television set, which is ages ago. It's not something that you can transport to the other tools. So we will see how this is helping the system to work out. However, I think we studied this model to bring it to Catalonia, because we think that the Catalans would pay to have their television, because they have the same feeling for TV3 that the British has for the BBC. But politicians are not happy enough with because of the crisis, because of the economical crisis. You know, people feel that this public service is not something that is necessary now. They think, you know, we want to make sure schools, we have the appropriate educational system and also health system, but media are not perceived as something that is nuclear to our health, democratic health, which I think is crucial. More questions?
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
I very much appreciate the distinction between the concepts of public interest and social interest. I assume that when you speak of public interest, it's what politicians call interés general, right? Which is an extremely Jacobin expression. So I really appreciate your presentation for making this distinction clear between both. I have a couple of questions. Maybe if you could comment on a couple of recent developments in the context of everything that you have told us. I was wondering if you could, I don't know, tell us something about those press conferences without questions that Spanish politicians do. And I'm particularly interested in hearing you if you think that Spanish media, both public and private, have addressed these situations with professional responsibility.
I think journalists, when we were talking about the commitment of professionals, I was talking about this. I mean, you need to know what are you there for. You are there to serve social interest. So if you have, you are in the middle of a political conflict like it's in Spain. We haven't talked much about corruption in Spain, but it's main topic now, right? Because we have discovered that the PP, which is a popular party, which is, as you know, the party who is governing Spain at the time, they had a double accountancy in their party, in which they received money from industry to get public contracts, right? A kind of commission. So we are dealing with the investigation of that. Since these papers came across at the public arena through the news El País, the newspaper of prestigious there, as you know, Rajoy, who is the president of the state, decided not to give any explanation about that. Not even though, but when he's in a press conference, he doesn't admit questions. So nobody can ask him about anything. He just goes and declarates, and journalists are there like you now, and have no capability of doing any questions, making questions, no questions. We just, I'm going to address to you, I'm going to give you this boring conference, and then you will not be able to make questions. So what if I've said something that is not of interest to you? You must have the right to say, Monica, why you have said that? Monica, why you haven't explained that? Journalists would go to this press conference, sit there, listen to the declaration, and go back and not say nothing. Private and public media should not go to this press conference. Just not go. If he doesn't want to make questions, nobody goes. And that's the only way he will understand that he needs to answer the questions, because he must be subject to public scrutiny. Otherwise, we are not doing the job. I mean, journalists are not there just to cut the image, get the image of if he's healthy or not. I mean, has no. And I think if we do not all together jointly, public and private, and face this problem, we are weakening democracy, because people is accepting that we accept that. So this is it's something that is really diminishing our work. I mean, people just think, well, if journalists accept that, that means that it's correct, because they see no conflict on that. Even if we write it down, there's no conflict there. I mean, now they make funny jokes with words about it and say Rajoy, because sometimes he projects his image through a plasma, television, no? And they say this is the president the plasma president, because he goes on the screen, you know. But that's not the thing. This is not. Question?
Okay, I have lots of questions, but obviously I'll not abuse my position as introducer, and I'll ask one. And I'll do it Terribas style. I'll ask you a hard question. Maybe two. Given that your position as full responsibility for Catalan television was short-lived, 4 years, it's obvious that you didn't have enough time to transform the channel. But would you admit to the persistence of telebasura in TV3 during that period?
No, I think there was not telebasura during that period. I think there was some sort of what we call telebasura when we talk about reality. We talk about this. There was a period of time in Catalonia in which I think they tried to do this sort of program, right? Because sometimes we say that TV3 has never done that. No, yes, we tried. The thing is that the Catalans don't want to watch it in TV3. The Catalans want to watch these things in other channels, but not in his channel. In her channel, not in mine. I want to go to the cinema to see this, but I don't want it in-house, right? So they feel towards these sort of programs, like, Gran Hermano, Big Brother, they watch it. Because when it's broadcast through Telecinco, they watch it. The Catalans watch it. But they don't want to see it in TV3. So when you are sort of programming our channels, you think which contents will not be violating this internal code. And in the beginning of the 90s, or mid-90s, TV3 did some funny things, right? Now everybody has forgotten. But all of them are in the private sector now, doing that on the screens. And they are Catalans, because they started doing it in TV3. And now they are doing this sort of programs in Telecinco. And we say, oh, you see, that's rubbish. But it's not rubbish, it's what they did in our television, sometimes 7 years ago. At the time I was the director of TV3, I don't think that was this sort of programs. Do you remember one? Which one?
No, I'm not a watcher of television, but occasionally and it was in your period that I remarked the continuity of programs such as EDI contests. You admit to that, right?
Yeah.
There was such a thing. But in any case, it was not new. So my question had to do with your ability or inability to change.
Yeah. The thing is, what I always tried is, that's why I wanted the Barcelona football, but that's what I wanted the soccer, and that's what I wanted the motor races. Because when you put a Barcelona match on TV3, you get huge audience figures, and then you can allow to do documentaries, right? And that my strategy was, once a week I have a football match, either Barca, Madrid, you put Mourinho in the screen and everybody watches it, see if it says something funny or something. So you have one Madrid per week or one Barca per week, and Formula 1 race once every 2 weeks. And you can put a strong documentary in prime time and get little audience figures, right? No problem. You put an hour documentary close to the news, so that 4,000 people will watch it, and you can balance the audiences. And that was my strategy. What I did normally was these big sports substitutes from the contests of realities, and these sports, you can be able to project some sort of heavy content, and people will watch it. People will watch it if you put it in prime time. If you put it at 12 at night, like my program was, nobody watched it. I mean, I did a late news program for 6 years, and nobody watched it. People say, oh yes, I watched it. No, they were sleeping. Everybody was sleeping. Nobody would watch that. Because I did interviews that's 45 minutes long. I mean, people, it was 1 at night. No chance. People have to get up at 7 and go to work. I mean, but if you put this sort of program at 10:30, people watch it. But you need to balance this with other sort of programs in order to achieve the leadership. Because if you are not leading the audiences, then you don't have social impact. And if you don't have social impact, you don't do public service, you do minority service, right? So you need people from around, people from all your society to come to your channel. And maybe they are not interested in documentaries, but they will come one day and watch a Barca football match. And then they will be trapped by the next offer that you put just after the match, which is something I did several times. I did the Barca match and a documentary. And after Messi playing, they will find themselves watching a documentary, and they will just watch it because the documentary was good. But when you look at the newspaper and say, what's today, what's on half documentary? Oh no. But if you are watching Messi playing football, then all of a sudden you end up seeing a Science Fiction, which is a documentary that we do an hour long, which is quite a strong document. And they watch it. So it was a success. And that was funny. In TV3, they've gone through labor problems with political structure, and I had a lot of strikes, right? And because they wanted more salary and so on. And every time I had a strike, we agreed with the labor syndicats. Unions. With the labor unions, the programming of that day. And I offered them to put documentaries all day. Documentaries. And we were leaders. One day, 24 hours, just documentaries. Their own documentaries all day. And we managed to lead the figures of the rest of the channel. That was great. That means that your audience is so used to this sort of content that they appreciate it, even the day that you are not doing anything else. No news, no sports, nothing, just documentaries. And some of the documentaries were related to sports, I must say, but but it was great, because that means that the audience has get used to this sort of content. But it's a matter of balancing. That's why when people ask, why TV3 has to pay for Barca? And I said, well, look, because when you pay for Barca, you can manage to do other content. Because if you only do minority, they will just be residual programming. At the end, you will have little audiences, and it will not worth the money. You know.
Oh, I have a question. You mentioned about because you are paid, you have to you're trapped in this because some journalists, they have this job, and then they have to thinking about if they broadcasting something, and then it will threatening their own interest. I was wondering, is there a channel you could let the public know, if you broadcast something, the public will support you, which the way is I think the majority of people, the democratic society, the people want to support you. They want to support the journalist to speak for them, not speak for the industry, for the politicians, for the corporations. I think the majority of people want to do that. But as I hear your lecture, I got this information. But most people sit in front of TV, if they know this is like you are trapped in there, you really want to speak for the people. I want to speak for you. Support me. I want to speak for you. And then is there a way, is there a channel to let the public know?
Well, the key thing is I would like politics to have social conscious of why it's so important that media should be professional and independent. That's the first thing. The first thing we should manage is to convince political structures that media are relevant to health, to the health of democracy. That's very important. Because if we don't understand that the public service is something nuclear to our public affairs, to our strength as a society, everything you have to beg people to support you is not working. The key thing is to structurally convince people that as well as education and health are relevant to your wealthness, media are. I mean, when you put on television every night, some people cannot spend money on going to the cinema and to a theater, or people just watch television as the way in which they live within society. They don't have other tools to live, to feel integrated and cohesive within a society. It's television the medium through which they get this feeling of social pertinence. Pertinence, right? So you need to convince political structures that media are relevant. I was discussing that with the president of Catalonia some months ago when I finished my period as a manager of TV3, and I was telling him, please, it's very important that you understand that public and private media are relevant to what's happening. Social values. I mean, it depends on the content we broadcast,